Leicester City might be the most chaotic club in football. They shocked the world by winning the Premier League in 2016, a true underdog story, beating 5,000 to 1 odds to become champions.
I think there's no doubt that is the greatest achievement, I think, in the history of our game for what Leicester have done. What Leicester have done is give inspiration to every football club, every manager, player, supporter, all across the land, that one day that could be them.
Literally a miracle. There's better odds that I bag Bonnie Blue. But since then, financial struggles, a heartbreaking helicopter tragedy, and wildly inconsistent results. They lifted the FA Cup in 2021.
When we won the Premier League and when we won the FA Cup, and that's something probably I would never have dreamed of in my lifetime, doing both of those things. So
Then got relegated in 2023.
Really spectacular, but I genuinely feel Leicester tonight have gone. And there's no coming back from it. I think most Leicester fans will think exactly the same.
Bounced back by winning the championship in 2024.
A signal that Leicester are straight back up to the Premier League.
Only to be relegated again in 2025. Fairy tale one year, free fall the next. That's Leicester City. The joy of being back in the Premier League lasted about as long as Gary Neville's managerial career. Any last bit of hope was gone after Leicester fans had to watch Sideshow Bob play week in, week out. Seriously, this guy might be the worst player the Premier League has ever seen. Success in one moment, chaos in the other. This is the story of Leicester City.
I want to say one thing about Leicester. If you'd have told me 8-10 years ago that Leicester would win the Premier League, win the FA Cup, win the Community Shield, and then get relegated a few years later, I'd have taken that. I'd have bitten your hand off and it would have been a miracle. So
Leicester's run in 2016 was impressive, not just because they played unbelievable football, beating teams that had spent hundreds of millions of dollars, but more because of where the club was just 8 years prior. On May 4th, 2008, Leicester drew with Stoke City 0-0, but it was not enough to save the club from relegation. A dark moment for the club, as they had dropped to the 3rd tier of English football for the first time in their history. Ian Holloway was sacked, and Leicester were in disarray. But Holloway's replacement was Nigel Pearson, and from this moment, Leicester went on a meteoric rise. Pearson led Leicester straight to the League One title, leading the division for much of the season and also going on a club record 23 league games unbeaten. They clinched their return to the championship with 3 games remaining in the season, defeating Southend United 2-0 on the 18th of April 2009. Leicester's first season back in the championship was also successful under Pearson. Pearson showed his ambition at the beginning of the season by announcing that his team would not just settle for consolidation, but that it would be aiming straight for the playoffs. The Foxes finished 5th in their first season back in the 2nd tier and made the playoffs for the 5th time. They played Cardiff City in the semi-final and showed a fighting spirit to come from 2 goals down on aggregate to lead 3-2, though they ultimately lost via penalty shootout. In the summer of 2010, however, Pearson left to become the manager of Hull City. Pearson was replaced by Paulo Sousa, who was sacked after just 9 league games after a poor start. There were questions about player fitness and morale as Leicester found themselves at the bottom of the league. On the 3rd of October 2010, former England, Lazio, and Benfica manager Sven-Göran Eriksson was announced as Sousa's replacement. He guided the club to an eventual 10th place finish. Leicester were favorites for promotion in the next season, but on the 24th of October 2011, following an inconsistent start, with the Foxes just winning 5 out of their first 13 games, Eriksson left the club by mutual consent. 3 weeks later, Nigel Pearson was confirmed to be returning to the club as Eriksson's successor. In the 2012-2013 season, Leicester struggled with playoff heartbreak, as Anthony Knockaert had a 97th minute penalty saved, and Troy Deeney scored immediately at the other end in one of the most iconic videos ever seen in the sport. Thankfully, that heartbreak didn't last too long, as Leicester had an incredibly successful 2013-2014 season, finishing 1st in the championship with 102 points, securing automatic promotion back to the Premier League. Leicester started well in their return to the Premier League, picking up 2 draws in their first 3 games before getting their first win with a 1-0 win against Stoke. Then they went on to beat Manchester United 5-3 after coming back from 3-1 down. At the time, they were even higher on the table than Louis van Gaal's Manchester United team. By March, however, things had changed for the worse. A poor run of form had caused Leicester to fall in last place with only 19 points from 29 games. No club had ever stayed up with fewer than 20 points from 29 matches. It looked like Leicester was headed back to the championship unless they made a great escape. And that's exactly what they did. After losing 4-3 to Tottenham at the end of March, Leicester went on an unbelievable run of games, winning 7 of their next 9. After beating Queen's Park Rangers 5-1 on the last match day of the season, Leicester had pulled off mathematically the best ever escape from relegation the Premier League had ever seen, as the Foxes finished 14th, only the 3rd team ever to survive in the Premier League after being bottom at Christmas. Despite the success, however, Pearson was sacked after falling out with the club's owners, the club stating the working relationship is no longer viable. The sacking was linked to a number of public relations issues involving Pearson throughout the season, with the final straw involving his son James's role in a racist sex tape made by 3 Leicester reserve players in Thailand during a postseason goodwill tour. Pearson was replaced with former Chelsea manager Claudio Ranieri. At the start of the 2016 season, Ranieri's men were seen as favorites for relegation candidates, as the bookmakers gave him a 5,000 to 1 odds of winning the Premier League title. While the world doubted them, Leicester started the season flying, losing only 1 game in their first 15 matches, and topping the table in December ahead of Arsenal, Manchester City, and Manchester United. Striker Jamie Vardy, who 4 years previously had been playing non-league football at Fleetwood Town, scored in 11 straight Premier League matches, beating the record of the time set by Ruud van Nistelrooy. Having been at the bottom of the table at Christmas 2014, Leicester were now top at Christmas 2015 after a 3-2 win against Everton at Goodison Park. Their form continued into the new year, where they beat second place Manchester City 3-1 to go 6 points clear at the top of the table. A 2-0 victory at Sunderland on the 10th of April, coupled with Tottenham Hotspur's 3-0 win over Manchester United, ensured Leicester's qualification for the UEFA Champions League for the first time in their history. Despite people doubting whether the Foxes could maintain their form, Leicester won the Premier League on the 2nd of May 2016 after Tottenham blew a 2-goal lead against Chelsea.
I think we've been waiting for this moment to come for so long, never quite believing it would happen.
Not only were Leicester exceptional going forward with the skills of Mahrez, the engine of Conte, and the pace and finishing of Vardy, but they were also solid defensively with the backline of Morgan, Huth, Simpson, and Fuchs, only conceding 36 goals. Their 4-4-2 shape, along with their fast counter-attacking style, was a throwback to some of the teams that we saw dominate the Premier League in the early to mid-2000s. 4 Leicester players were named in the PFA Team of the Year, as the Foxes had taken the world by storm. Post-2016, however, the Leicester team wasn't the same. On the 16th of July 2016, N'Golo Kante, the man at the heart of the Leicester midfield, signed for Chelsea, one of the most irreplaceable players on the team. Despite losing him, Leicester started the season off well in the Champions League, going undefeated in their first 5 matches to get to the round of 16. But they were struggling in the league, spending much of the first few months in the bottom half of the Premier League table. As a result, despite being the coach of the year, Ranieri was sacked, with the Foxes being only 1 point above the relegation zone. The sacking was met with significant anger and disappointment from both the fans and media.
You can see the way people have turned against the way Leicester have handled the whole thing, and that's understandable. And I can understand.
Your reaction to that shock news? Well, I think it's a joke, to be honest with you, and I think
with Craig Shakespeare as the temporary manager, Leicester got that new manager boost as they beat Liverpool and Hull City both 3-1. They continued their good form in the Champions League, beating Sevilla in the round of 16, then narrowly losing to Atletico in the quarterfinals. The Leicester ownership was impressed and gave Shakespeare a full-time contract for 3 years. However, that good form was very short-lived. Following a poor start to the season, Shakespeare was sacked in October of 2017 after just 4 months officially in charge, with Leicester in 18th place in the table. Claude Puel took over the team and helped Leicester finish the season in the top half of the table. But at the start of the next season, tragedy occurred. A helicopter carrying Chairman Vichai and 4 others malfunctioned and crashed outside the club stadium shortly after taking off from the pitch after the match against West Ham United. All 5 people on board the helicopter passed away. While Puel had saved Leicester's 2018 season, the 2019 season was poor for the Foxes. 4 successive home defeats, including a 4-1 home loss to Crystal Palace, caused Puel to be sacked in the February of 2019.
Claude Puel, the manager's been very deliberate in trying to create a more progressive, more possession-based style of play. Does that suit your style of play?
Brendan Rodgers was the replacement and helped the club finish 9th. Sound familiar? Under Rodgers, Leicester looked to be improving. They started the 2020 season picking up 38 points from their first 16 matches, which included an 8-game winning streak from the 19th of October to the 8th of December. They absolutely slapped Southampton 9-0, making history, and even reached the semi-finals of the Leagues Cup. But despite their fantastic start, their form dropped off towards the end of the season, as the Foxes only won 2 of their next 9 games after the league resumed due to the coronavirus. 3 defeats in their last 4 matches caused them to slide to 5th place. Keep in mind, this was still Leicester City's second highest ever finish in the Premier League, but given the fact that for the majority of the season they were in the top 4, Europa League seemed like a disappointment considering they could have had Champions League football. Rodgers looked to be the right man for the job as Leicester won the FA Cup in May of 2021, their second major trophy in the space of 5 years. Yuri Tielemans scored the only goal as Leicester defeated Chelsea at Wembley Stadium. Leicester continued their form, winning the Community Shield in August of 2021, showing their good form from the season before was no fluke. While their performance in the group stages of the Europa League was disappointing with them finishing 3rd, their transfer to the newly established Conference League was a blessing in disguise. Leicester ended up getting all the way to the semi-finals in the competition, losing to Roma. It wasn't the Champions League, but it was still the club's first ever semi-finals appearance in Europe. Everything was looking good, but the club's finances began to be heavily impacted by the pandemic. Leicester were hit harder than most clubs because their parent company, King Power International Group, was in the travel retail sector. It also didn't help that Leicester had spent big in the summer of 2021 as they tried to move away from their business model of constantly selling their best players. Before, N'Golo Kante, Danny Drinkwater, Riyad Mahrez, Harry Maguire, and Ben Chilwell all had departed for nearly £260 million. But this time, instead of selling, Leicester spent more than £50 million on new players such as Daka, Soumare, and Vestergaard. When you spend big like that, you have to perform, and Leicester didn't. In the 2022 season, they didn't qualify for European football. At the same time, the club was trying to invest in infrastructure to better compete with the Premier League's Big Six in the long run. Another issue was Leicester failing to sell some of their biggest earners. Tielemans, Evans, and Soyuncu all left as free agents.
And having so many players out of contract, I mean, we've heard it said so many times over the years, the team is too good to go down. When you look at some of the ability in that Leicester team, I think it's a genuine case this year to say exactly that.
Rodgers left the club on the 2nd of April 2023 via mutual consent, with the team in the relegation zone with only 10 matches left.
Huge breaking news from the Premier League, specifically with Leicester City, because Brendan Rodgers is no longer.
Dean Smith was appointed as his replacement until the end of the season. However, Leicester was still relegated, ending the club's 9-year stint in the Premier League.
Well, he's not really been able to turn the tide, has he? 6 games in charge, Dean Smith, 1 victory, but it's 1 in 14 for Leicester City, so this is not a new...
They were only the 2nd Premier League champion to be relegated. With Leicester in disarray, Enzo Maresca was appointed as the club's new manager in June of 2023.
He's been very businesslike as Enzo Maresca. He's needed to motivate a side that came out of the Premier League with a bit of a whimper and get established presences on board, which is what he's done.
Under Maresca, Leicester started off wonderfully, winning 13 of their first 14 games. Their form did get a little bit more inconsistent towards the back end of the season.
Enzo, I'd imagine you're pretty angry after that tonight.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
But Leicester still ended up winning the league, getting promotion back to England's top flight.
It's been a bit of a weird one because they were early doors, mate. They were just battering everybody. They were flying, and I thought, right, this is going to be done for Christmas. And then there were a couple of little bumps along the way, and they seem to have stabilised it over the last, let's say, month or so, and they're now over the line and they've got it.
Jamie Vardy did not look like a 37-year-old as he once again finished the season as Leicester's top goal scorer with 20 goals in all competitions. A player who truly epitomizes what Leicester City stands for as a club.
No, Jamie Vardy, he's got 16 goals, mate. Like, you know, he's still scoring goals. I know he's 37, but...
Right behind him, Mavididi with 13 goals.
What he's always wanted, you feel, is a home. Very much had that with Leicester, which meant that you could get the minutes under your belt first and foremost, which then brings about the consistency, which is what he's done. He's got a skill set that would suit the Premier League. He's got a skill set that has lit up the Championship.
And Shrewsbury Hall with 12. A technically gifted player who the fans love as he came up from the youth academy, meaning he has seen it all when it comes to the rise and fall of Leicester City.
Feeling When I was here, the club was lower down in the leagues, and I've seen them progress.
Now, Maresca ball was not universally loved by Leicester fans. Some found it boring, possession without purpose, foreplay without penetration, but they did have the second best attack in the league with 89 goals in 46 appearances. Very impressive considering Leicester had lost their most creative player in James Maddison to Tottenham in the summer. Defensively, Leicester were good too, only conceding 41 goals. It helped having a solid goalkeeper like Mats Hermansen.
But we've gone for Mats Hermansen, the goalkeeper, who potentially, if he'd been there last season, they wouldn't even been in the Championship this season.
There is, I mean, that's a wonderful hypothetical.
Yannick Vestergaard was fantastic as well. Connor Cody deserves a shout out too, as the Englishman really proved he was worth the investment. Now at this point, the sun was shining again in Leicester. The Foxes were back in the Premier League, and fans were hopeful. But that happiness lasted about as long as I do in the bedroom. Just weeks after sealing promotion, Maresca packed his bags and headed for Chelsea. A huge opportunity for him, but a gut punch for Leicester. Suddenly, the club found itself without a manager and without direction, right before the biggest challenge of all, surviving the Premier League. Then Dewsbury Hall followed Maresca to London. So boom, there went two vital pieces of their championship winning side. As a response, the board turned to a familiar face in English football, Steve Cooper.
Right, well, let's get more on the breaking news that Leicester have appointed Steve Cooper as their new manager on a 3-year contract.
He had saved Nottingham Forest, he'd worked wonders with a young squad. On paper, he was a smart, steady choice. But from the very beginning, something felt off. Cooper's style, structured, defensive, counterattacking, clashed with the possession-based system that the squad had been drilled on. The team was built to control the ball to keep possession, and now they were being told to sit back and absorb pressure. He never settled on a best 11. The midfield looked directionless. The front line, well, they lacked chemistry, and the losses started piling up fast. 6 in the first 10. By November, Leicester were 18th, and the King Power was filled with silence instead of belief. Cooper was sacked, and the club was already in crisis. In desperation, Leicester turned to Ruud van Nistelrooy.
We start with breaking news from Leicester City and the man they've been chasing to become their new manager, Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Maybe the board saw Van Nistelrooy destroy Leicester as United's interim manager and thought he could replicate the same form. After all, this was a former Manchester United and Real Madrid legend, a man with charisma, presence, and ambition. He had shown promise at PSV. Could he do the same here? Now, his first 2 games actually brought some hope, but again, that spark quickly vanished. Van Nistelrooy ended up losing 11 of his first 15 matches. If this was FIFA, I would have already broken my controller. They did beat Spurs to end a run of 7 straight league losses, but they were unable to build on that momentum as they lost their next 4 games, including a 4-0 spanking at Everton. Thank God for Spurs, I guess. Somehow they found a way to be worse than a team at the bottom of the table. At this point, the Leicester players looked lost again. They had used up all of their new manager boosts, and this time there were even bigger cracks to worry about. By February, it was all falling apart. 6 straight home losses without scoring a goal, a Premier League record by the way. A 4-0 thrashing by Brentford, where fans were seen leaving before the 30-minute mark. 10 defeats in 11 games, and only 1 league win since New Year's Day. Then fast forward a couple of other months, and Leicester somehow made Jack Grealish look good again. The mood in Leicester had turned from frustration to fatigue. Even the protests, like the Project Reset movement, were half-hearted. There was no fire, just a deep, painful disconnect between the club and its fans. In the loss at Everton, where they conceded after just 10 seconds, it didn't take long for the visiting Fox faithful to sing "We're Going Down," Lily Phillips' favorite song. Leicester conceded the first goal in 25 of their first 30 Premier League games. At one point, they didn't have a clean sheet in 23 matches. Their defense was basically these 2 chicks. Much of the blame, according to the fans, doesn't lie with the manager, or even really the players. It's the boardroom. Director of football, John Rudkin, and CEO Susan Whelan have largely stayed silent. No public reassurances, no bold decisions, just silence. The fans have noticed. Walkouts have become common. Chants against the board have grown louder. The collapse hasn't just been on the pitch, it's also been at the top. This wasn't supposed to be the story. Not after bouncing back from relegation. Not with a young, talented squad. Not with the memory of 2016 still so fresh. But unfortunately, Leicester City fans have to face the grim reality. They will not be playing Premier League football next season. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll love this one too. Check it out right here.